I was an operations manager at a food manufacturing site with 5 production teams. A strong shift supervisor wanted an operations career but avoided cross-shift conflict and had twice been passed over for acting manager opportunities. I wanted to help her build the influence and planning evidence needed for the next role, not simply give encouraging feedback. I could assign training courses, give her a larger shift target, or create a supported stretch assignment requiring cross-functional leadership. We reviewed feedback from her previous interviews, her performance data, and situations she found uncomfortable. Together, we identified stakeholder challenge and long-range planning as the 2 gaps. I asked her to lead a 6-week changeover reduction project across production, maintenance, and quality, with clear outcomes and weekly coaching rather than taking decisions for her. A maintenance lead initially bypassed her and came to me. I redirected the decision to her, then coached her privately on framing shared goals and using evidence instead of authority. Her first project update buried the trade-offs. I recorded a rehearsal, asked her to lead with the decision required, and had her seek direct feedback from 2 skeptical peers. I also documented the operating assumptions, named the owner for each follow-up action, and set a clear review date so that temporary controls could not quietly become permanent. I wrote the decision, assumptions, owners, and stop conditions on a 1-page control plan so the next shift could challenge the logic rather than rely on verbal context. I used both a leading indicator and a customer outcome measure that prevented a short-term productivity improvement from hiding quality, safety, or backlog age. During implementation, I stayed at the operating point for the first cycle, asked frontline employees what the mechanism missed, and changed only 1 variable at a time. I assigned named owners for each checkpoint and made escalation thresholds visible in the shift huddle, which reduced ambiguity when I was not physically present. After stabilization, I compared the result with the original baseline, checked for cost or defect displacement, and documented the mechanism for the other shifts. Before committing, I asked a supervisor who disagreed with me to identify the weakest assumption, then converted that concern into a measurable checkpoint rather than relying on consensus. I separated mandatory controls from preferences, which let the team move quickly without weakening the safety, quality, or customer promise that the operation existed to protect. For each alternative, I estimated the likely customer impact, labor requirement, operational reversibility, and worst credible failure, and I explained why my chosen path offered the best balance. I briefed affected teams before launch, checked understanding through questions rather than attendance, and made the escalation route clear to people working outside my shift. I also protected normal operations by defining which work would pause, which work would continue, and who could authorize expansion beyond the initial controlled scope. At every review point, I compared actual performance with the assumption that justified the decision. When they diverged, I changed the plan rather than defending the original recommendation. I made the cost of the choice visible as well as the benefit, because hiding overtime, rework, or displaced backlog would have made the result look stronger but less useful. Once the immediate issue was resolved, I held a short review with frontline representatives and partner teams, captured what failed in the original mechanism, and assigned permanent actions. The follow-up remained on my weekly operating review until the control had an owner, an auditable measure, and enough stable data to show the improvement was sustained. That discipline helped distinguish correlation from causation. I looked for the expected change at the affected process step before crediting the intervention for the overall outcome. Change over time fell from 42 to 31 minutes, schedule adherence rose 6 points, and she earned the next acting manager rotation. 3 months later, she secured a permanent operations manager role. Before closing the action, I sampled performance across different shifts and demand conditions, so the result did not depend on one unusually experienced team or a quiet operating window. Development works when I diagnose a specific gap, provide real ownership with psychological safety, and let the person experience and repair the difficult moments themselves.